Hi, I'm Caitlin and welcome to the Lit Review. Today we are doing my October reading wrap-up where I go through all the books and all the stats. So let's get into it. This month felt very strange for me because I've been telling you in a lot of different places and spaces that I've been in a reading slump, but my stats are not going to reflect that. And so I just kind of want to clarify. For me, even though I read a reasonable amount of books and even rated several of those books quite high, the idea of reading has become more like a chore right now. Like, even when I deeply enjoy the things I'm reading, I have to like force myself to sit down and read right now. And to me, that is like the deep pits of a reading slump, because you have to think of reading as work instead of the joy that it normally is. So I don't mean to misrepresent myself and my reading slump in any way. For me, that is very much what the reading slump entails, is that reading, I just don't have the motivation to read. I've been forcing myself to do it and have been pleasantly surprised with some of the results. It's been a month of just not finding joy in the act of reading, even though I sometimes really love the books when I force myself to do it. So while the numbers might not suggest reading slump, trust me, the feels are there. So that, again, not to malign any of these wonderful books, these are actually some of my best numbers that I've had, which feels so strange to say that in the middle of a really hardcore emotional reading slump. I feel like slumps come in two different flavors. It's either the emotional kind that I'm currently experiencing, or it's when everything you're reading just feels like trash and you hate it and you feel like there's something wrong with you. So I feel like I'm in the first category. But regardless, that's kind of my big caveat, my big like, please believe me, because what I'm about to tell you stats wise is not going to be helpful for proving that narrative whatsoever. So I read 7 books, though I'm going to be talking to you about 8 because I did DNF a book. So some of my stats include that 8th book, but in terms of like what I actually read start to finish, 7. Pages read were 2,804. Hours listened, 0. And my average rating is a 4.1. This is why it's like, you're not gonna believe me when I say I'm in a reading slump, because it's the highest average rating I've ever had. In terms of my audience, I read 2 like adult books, read 1 new adult, DNF'd another new adult, and then my remaining 4 books were young adult books. So my top 2 genres for this month were romance and fantasy. In terms of format, I did not read any audiobooks. I read 1 ebook and DNF'd another ebook, and then 6 of the books that I read were physical books. Of those 7, 8, 6 of them were owned, and then I borrowed 1 that I finished and 1 that I DNF'd. The ratings, and I will put a fancy graphic up here for you, but of which I don't believe DNFs are included on this graphic, but I did DNF something, so one of those. 0 1 star, 0 1.5 star, no 2 stars, no 2.5 stars, 2 3 stars, 1 3.5 star, 1 4 star, no 4.5s, and 3 5-star ratings. 3. This, again, is why you're gonna tell me that I'm not in a reading slump, but I promise I am. I like to do long-form book reviews during my wrap-ups, so I will include timestamps below if you would like to hop around to different books. So let's jump in. Okay, so the first thing I read this month was a reread. Again, I was starting to feel that slump at the end of September and was hoping that a reread would coax me out of it. Conveniently enough, there's the ACOTAR along going on, and for the month of October, reading A Court of Thorns and Roses was the first book for that. I will leave the hosts linked down below if you would like to participate. October was ACOTAR, but you can catch up with that, and then we're reading the next book for November. So I own the like paperback, and I also own this very fancy gilded special edition version. So for this book, I actually think I probably would have realistically rated it on second read as like a 4-star read, but I decided to preserve my first read through, which was a 5-star. So that's kind of why my stats are slightly inflated this month. If you are one of the people who has just refused to read this series or is still on your TBR, it is basically a Tamlin retelling or Beauty and the Beast retelling, the first book anyway, where Feyre is a young woman who's just trying to feed her family. She goes out hunting in the woods one day and shoots down this giant wolf that was about to destroy the deer that she had wanted to catch to feed her family. But it turns out that wolf was a fae, and so she is traded to the fairy realms, a life for a life, to save her family's life again. Then when she's in the Fae realms, there's a lot of mysterious happenings as she is kind of hosted by this Lord Tamlin who has a mask, and there's some mysterious curse, and she's trying to figure out, you know, like, can she get back to her family? Does she want to stay put? And as feelings start to develop, and it just really sets off the series. So on my second read through of it, I felt like it was a little bit slower, and also knowing what I know, reading up to like book 3 in the novella, so hard not to see everything coming. And I'm already deeply invested in stuff that happens in like books 2 and 3. So like watching some of the stuff go down in book 1, you're like, no, that's not okay. And I'm very deliberately trying not to be spoilery with that. So that's the rough synopsis. What I am going to do for you is talk you through this like special edition, especially if you are an ACOTAR fan. Like, I kind of just want to give you the quick synopsis on whether or not the special edition box is worth it. So the box itself, just very plain and straightforward, does have like gilding on the front and the side, and has this very pretty foil design on the back with the roses and, you know, just the kind of crown looking design. So there's that. That's what the box itself looks like. Then when you take the book out, it has this beautiful foiled gold of Feyre shooting, and then on the back it's the continued scene, and you can see hopefully the wolf. So it really is like the scene that kicks this whole series off. And then the spine also has gold foil, title, author. The pages themselves are not super special. I do, again, end papers, gold, kind of floral design, not super striking, to be honest with you. The maps, 2-page map spread are, you know, really pretty, nice. Good. I mean, the maps in, I think, the series overall are really high quality. So I think you're not necessarily getting something markedly better with this. And then the main thing that you'd be seeing is that like the chapter headings have, again, that same kind of like floral design that is all over this thing in foil. And then the side, on the side of every other page, there's just like a little dangling vine. So it's, honestly, as somebody who deeply loves this series and is in the midst of a reread of it, I don't think the special edition is necessarily worth it. I'm probably still gonna keep it because, you know me, I love foil, I am a sucker. I will say though that like it's not blowing me away as like a special edition, especially because like some of the binding on this is incredibly loose. Like several of the pages like almost lift out. So it just doesn't feel like, even though it's very pretty and foiled and, you know, I love that stuff, the quality of the book binding itself, not so great. And so I often find that with some of these special editions, you like really have to love it to want it. So like, unless you are just like hardcore obsessed collecting every potential cover of this book, I don't recommend investing in the special edition, especially because I haven't seen this style done for the other 2 books, the other 2 like the other 2 full books in the series. So it doesn't feel like it's worth it if you're never gonna get the other 2. So I will be keeping this. I completely neglected to mention this, but if you are familiar with my wrap-ups, you know that I have 2 boxes down by my feet. I have a maybe box and a no box, and so at the end of every little review that I do for you with the books, I like to tell you whether or not I'm going to keep it, put it into my maybe box where I can, you know, have some quiet time away from it and decide whether or not I actually want to keep it, or if it's just a solid no for me. Do I need to keep it? No. So when those boxes fill up, I will do a kind of unhaul for you or make decisions for you, but those are the ones that I'll be referencing throughout the rest of the video. Going back to the special edition ACOTAR, I do think I'll keep it just because of the foil, but it's definitely something that if I needed to get rid of something to make space on my shelves at a later date, I wouldn't hate losing this. So it's kind of a keep, but not like a high praise keep. Next, I, again, was really struggling, and so some of the things that I reach for when I'm struggling to find joy in reading are graphic novels and like romance or erotica. Those are the two things that like usually get me invested in reading, and they're really quick and easy to read, so they are kind of my like slump curers. So what I tried to do to fix that was reading Harley Quinn Breaking Glass by Mariko, Tamaki, and Steve Pugh. Like, the art on this was stunning. I just love the tones of everything. I love the color, and the story was so interesting to me as somebody who's been a long time comic and graphic novel lover, and specifically I tend to lean a little bit more towards the Marvel universe, but I do think DC has the best rogues gallery, and I think DC's female villains are just a cut above the rest, truly, and Harley Quinn is definitely one of those soft spots for me. So I really loved the story that Mariko Tamaki gave to Harley Quinn. Like, she captured just like that teenage naivete and like the bravado of it too, and just like, this really was not quite a full origin story, although it's definitely leading up to that, but it just was such an interesting take on like adolescent Harley, and I really loved it for that. So this got 4 stars for me. Yeah, so if you're a fan of Harley Quinn or the DC universe, or even just of Mariko Tamaki, like, check this one out. I do like it. I'm gonna keep it. I don't necessarily know how frequently I'm going to reread it, so I think it could be one of those things that I eventually unhaul, not because I don't like it, but because rereading is king for me in terms of keeping things on my shelves. But for now, I'm definitely going to be keeping this. And again, with that spirit of trying to read things that usually pull me out of a slump, I decided to try a Jessa Kane novel. I don't know why I keep trying Jessa Kane novels, because I don't have like bad things to say about them, but they're not my favorite either. Anyway, I read King Sized by Jessa Kane because that is like one of her newer releases, and I gave it a 3-star review. I've said this before in some of my other videos, but with like those really tiny like erotic romances or erotic novellas, I feel like I'm so hard for me to genuinely rate them. It's mostly about smut quality, if we're being honest here. So I think that's like perfectly fine. The King Sized is a short novella about the queen whose parents have just died. She's grieving at the loss of her parents. He ends up comforting her, and it sparks a connection, and she's just like really into him, and vice versa. Jessa Kane's like very insta-love and insta-lust. A lot of these like little tiny novellas are, so that's totally normal for the genre. Yeah, so it was just nice to see a plus-size hero. It was nice to see that there is a pretty intense age difference though, so if age differences bother you or freak you out, don't go here. So this one was set in a more historical setting, which I thought was interesting for Jessa Kane, since she mostly does contemporary things. So I kind of would like there to be more historical smut in my life. So that was at least a pick-me-up. So yeah, 3 stars. That one was something I checked out or borrowed on my Kindle Unlimited. So I won't be keeping that one, nor will I be, I think, purchasing that for the long haul. So next we get to my DNF. Again, I was trying to continue on with a nice little streak of things to like pick up my reading pace, and so I decided to try out Ball Peen Hammer by Lauren Rowe. I had read one of Lauren Rowe's books about this family with the brothers a couple of months ago. I think I read The Captain. That was the one I read. And I liked that one, but also I think gave you some pretty strong caveats of like, hey, I don't like these specific things in how the series, like how the people talk in the series or the repetition. So I'll just know that going in and we'll be able to handle it better. False. I DNF'd this book so freaking quickly because I don't know what possessed me. Like, of all the brothers, like, that were introduced in that book, the captain, why did I think Kane, the baby screw-up brother, was gonna be, like, a good place to go back to? Why? Kane as a character is somebody that was, I believe, like, all-star pitcher, like, headed towards the major leagues, and then he has a really bad injury, and so he ends up becoming a male stripper. So no shame here. No shame for any type of sex worker or anything like that. Kane's just an idiot. Kane as a person is an idiot, and I can't get past it. Like, he's young, yes, and young does not mean dumb necessarily, but like, he's so inconsiderate. The nickname thing got worse, if it's possible. And he's so, I'm sure the point of this little book is that he's supposed to grow and develop and prove that he's more than just like a handsome face, and that he's gonna find a new dream. I'm sure that's his character arc, but I don't care to stick around long enough to experience it. I liked the heroine of this so much, and just when we got to Kane's perspective, I was like, no, I can't do this. She deserves better. So DNF'd ball peen hammer. And I like Lauren Rowe's smut writing. She's really good at writing smut. She really is. I can't handle the repetition and the nicknames. In particular, there's a scene where you're in Kane's head and he's like deliberately repeating the same word because he's convinced that that's how you like incite desire in somebody, is to continually say like, it's a pleasure to meet you, my pleasure, like, so clearly this is like a tactic in Kane's head. But he says it, I kid you not, 20 times in one scene, and I just don't have the patience for it. I just don't, I'm sorry. So I would maybe consider reading some more Lauren Rowe in the future, but this was just not satisfying, not my cup of tea, and it really just like stopped a lot of my forward momentum in terms of reading. So after several days of not reading anything and just kind of dawdling, I decided to tackle a book that I have been deliberately ignoring out of fear for a while, and that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So this is one of my 5-star predictions. This is one of Jeremy's all-time favorite books, all-time favorite authors. So I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me and my relationship to this book. It's also, if you're at all on BookTube, this man is very hard to escape. He's very, very popular. So I'm not gonna help because this was a 5-star read for me. And truly one of the bigger joys in my reading month, where I did feel motivated to read and I did feel motivated to progress day in and day out. Like, I didn't take a lot of breaks with this. I do think it was a little slow to start, but it picked up really quickly when it did pick up. So Tortine is the publisher of this particular edition, and I think this is kind of an effort on the publisher side to get people invested in Brandon Sanderson early and often, because really this does straddle the line between what I would consider a young adult and adult. I think it's probably more of an adult fantasy, but it is published by a young adult press. So kind of, if you are interested in a more like dense or like long running YA, but also adult, that I would highly recommend Mistborn, because it does, I think, straddle that line really well. And I think part of the reason why it sometimes gets categorized as YA is because one of the main perspectives whose head we're in, Vin, this lady on the cover, is a teen. She's a like 16-year-old girl who has grown up on the streets and has really depended on what she calls her luck. And it's just like her general feeling that she can influence things over really short periods of time. But she kind of discovers through meeting this other group of people that it's not really luck, that she is an allomancer and that she can burn metals when she swallows them in her body, and these different metals give her different abilities. And she learns about this by the crewmaster of a thief gang who's trying to pull off one of the biggest coups and heists in history. Because he, Kelsier, is an Allomancer as well. So he teaches her about her gifts and the fact that she is a Mistborn. And so Mistborn are typically nobles, so it's really rare and really important that both Vin and Kelsier are not. So in Kelsier's head, a reasonable amount of time, and so you get to kind of see a lot of that heist planning and like the impact of, you know, a more adult concerns, and like his journey is really interesting. So there are like other perspectives in the book as well, but those are the two central ones. And you know me, when it's done right, I love a multi-perspective novel, and this definitely does that right for me. And one of the things I really liked about this is I think Sanderson does a really good job of foreshadowing things, and it's just enough breadcrumbs for you to kind of like sleuth stuff out and feel like you can take some leaps or guesses as to what's going on, but he's crafty enough that you're still wrong a lot of the time, and that's very satisfying because the way my mind works as a reader is I like to try to guess things as they go, and sometimes it's rewarding for me to be right, but more often than not it's a little frustrating. So I really like that he like hit that sweet spot of letting me guess about things as they come. Sometimes they were right, sometimes I was wrong, and when I was wrong, boy was I wrong, and it was very good. So maybe that's just me and my quirks of how I think of things as a reader, but I did really enjoy this book. So I'm just going to join the legion of people who like Brandon Sanderson and Mistborn now. This is a keeper, not just because of the 5-star, but because this is apparently my house stands Brandon Sanderson. So here we are. After all of these struggles, I finally picked up a book that I wanted to pick up much earlier in the month because Kaylani and I were supposed to buddy read it, and I kind of fell behind, so I dropped the ball. I'm sorry, Kaylani. But I did read it and did talk to her about it, but The Rose and the Dagger by Renée Ahdieh. So this is book 2 in a duology, and the first book, Wrath from the Dawn, is also the name of the series, so this is book 2 in the Wrath from the Dawn series, but I don't want to say too much about this because I think saying a lot about this book provides a lot of spoilers for book 1. So The Wrath from the Dawn as book 1 is very much a Arabian Nights or 1001 Nights retelling. The main character, Scheherazade, is willingly marrying into the royal family. The caliph of their country is killing girls at dawn, like every day. Marrying them and killing them, and she wants vengeance. So she doesn't just want to like stop this, she wants vengeance for the death of her friend, but she ends up being like really compelled by him, and her tactic of telling stories is just as impactful in the first book as it is in the original folk tale or fairy tale. So but as she continues to like lengthen her time with him, instead of like exacting the vengeance she desired, she ends up being really intrigued by him and potentially falling for him. And the first book leaves kind of on a major cliffhanger, and so this book picks up very shortly after that cliffhanger, and it's really about their continued journey and the mysterious circumstances that motivate Khalid to kill all of his brides. So there is resolution in this book. You also get a bit more perspectives, like you get to see her little sister's perspective frequently. You still get to see Scheherazade's perspective primarily, and a little bit of Khalid's, but like not a ton. It's a multi-perspective book, but I think it's better executed in book 1 than it is in the sequel. And ultimately, I gave this 3.5 stars because I did really enjoy continuing the journey with the characters, but I wasn't as like blown away by the writing and the character development and the plot even. So like I felt like I'm still a big Ahdieh fan and want to continue to read her writing because it is very beautiful writing. But I just think there was like too much going on and very slow. Like when it did pick up, it got me there. Like I did enjoy it. So I feel like the reason it's a 3.5 is because the ending really sped up. But it was such a slog to get to that point. And there were just too many things being set up with like not fast enough payoff for me to stay engaged. So part of that is also coming in from my reading slump and like my lack of motivation to read things. So that's probably affecting my rating too. I'm gonna go ahead and keep this because I really did love the first book in the series, The Wrath and the Dawn, and I would like to keep them as a duology. But yeah, I think the first book is so much better, and you're really reading this book to kind of get to the conclusion, but I don't think it's as impactful necessarily. So, Okay, and then the last 2 books were ones that I'm very glad I read, but they're definitely 2 books that I forced myself to get through because I didn't want to read anything, but they were still good books. So again, big old slump caveat here. The first one is How to Be an Antiracist by Ibram Kendi. Nonfiction can be kind of difficult to rate because it really is a very subjective reading experience, because all of us come in with different lived experiences, values, beliefs, perceptions, and often nonfiction is really the author's lived experience, values, beliefs, perceptions. And so sometimes you can take a lot from it, sometimes you can clash from it. So ratings in nonfiction are really, really personal, but I still believe in rating them to give you my perspective on things. So this was a very easy 5 stars. This book is so wonderfully written. You can tell that he's a natural instructor, a natural facilitator of conversations, a natural teacher. You know, this is just, and also his communication style really vibes with my communication style. So like, I know in my life, I tend to react with an I, not because I'm trying to center the narrative on myself, but because I think some of the best communication I can offer is to talk about, like, here's the thing that happened to me. Here's what I learned from that thing. Here's the lesson you can extrapolate to like broader life. Like, that's always been a big part of my teaching strategy when I've been teaching, especially at like a more college level. So, and I always tell students that too, like, hey, this is like how I communicate and experience the world. Take from it what you want. And so his communication style in each chapter very closely aligned with that kind of thing where he would tell you a personal story from his past, an experience he had with racism or some of his learning of anti-racist thought, and then he would extrapolate from that and go to like other learnings and teachings or conflicts with that original jumping off point, and then application of those learnings. And so it just felt like really natural scaffolding or like learning structures to where you really, by the end of each chapter, got what he was trying to say and like could think through it and process it in your own life. And I just think he's such a great writer. Like, I am going to try to track down more of Ibram Kendi's work because it's such a joy to read, even though it is a like difficult topic and difficult self-work to be able to do this, to read this book. When I bought this, I did not realize that I bought the large print edition. All I was interested in was getting a paperback, but I loved having the large print because I ended up leaving myself a lot of notes in the margins. And you can see that I kind of like stopped at a certain point with my tabs. So I did highlight a lot and leave a lot of notes in the book. So I need to go back through and like finish tabbing up this half. But at a certain point, I just got like more invested in it and just wanted to finish the book. So again, this was a 5-star. I wanted to finish it this month for several reasons, but it also was just a really easy book to finish. And the last book I read in October was again one of my rollover books from September because I've been struggling for a while to actually read the books I plan on reading. But I digress, and that is Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. I really was drawn into this book initially by its gorgeous cover, and I still think this cover is one of the most stunning covers I have seen in recent years from the YA genre. But the other thing that caught my eye initially is that it is pitched very strongly as Project Runway meets Mulan. And I just think that's kind of like my dream pitch for a book. This hardcover that I have here was a Owl Crate from last year. And so I really just, again, love the cover design. What I ended up feeling about the book overall was much more of a 3-star rating. And I did enjoy it. And I really did love the aspects that I thought I would enjoy, which is one of my favorite tropes of, you know, girl dressing up as a boy to achieve X goal. And in this case, our main character, Maya, is dressing up as a boy to become the Emperor's tailor, which is how the Project Runway aspect comes in. And so like the first chunk of the novel, I would say roughly like this much of the book is about the early stages of that competition. There's like one big challenge that she has to accomplish to truly be the master tailor of the kingdom. So, and that challenge is to weave dresses out of sunlight, moonlight, and the blood of stars, which ties back to the myths within this culture. So the Project Runway aspects of that were also really wonderful to read. I've mentioned many times before that I love the attention to detail on describing dresses and clothing when it's warranted. And it's definitely warranted given the topic of this book. I would categorize this as kind of like a historical fantasy. Even though this is set in a fantasy world, there's a lot of history and cultural elements that really make this book shine. I think I love the premise slightly more than the execution, and a lot of what that comes down to for me is pacing. There is a bit of a love story in here, but I found myself not that connected to the love story because I felt like it didn't develop well for me. I care about Maya, I care about her family, and I don't not care about her love interest, but I just don't feel, I didn't feel the feels, I wasn't oh man, they're my favorite romance of all time. I care about them. It was nice. It was pleasant. I'm interested to see where book 2 goes. I also want to put this in the maybe box because I have been in such an emotional reading slump that I don't know how I really feel about this book. So I'm tempted to keep it just for the pretty and all of that, but I'm not sure if that's actually the right call. So I'm gonna put this in the maybe box. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But I did enjoy this, and I would like to read book 2. I'm just not convinced that this is going to be it's going to leave a huge impact on my reading life, if that makes sense. Okay, so that was my reading wrap up for October. That is all the books and the stats of what I read this past month. So even though on the surface it is a pretty good reading month, there was a lot of struggle beneath the surface. So hopefully I accurately conveyed that. I'm really hoping to get out of that soon, but we'll see. I do think there are some hidden gems in this wrap up, and hopefully you will also like them as much as I do. But let me know if you read any of these books in the comments. Let me know if you had vastly different experiences or very similar ones. I just would love to chat with you about books. So thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of me or this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!